In a previous video, I completed the wiring of the amplifiers for the Grand Cherokee project. Now, one of the biggest challenges for this brand new SUV is how to get signal out of the factory head unit into those amplifiers. It's very common now that we need to keep the factory head unit as it has climate control and other vehicle features built in. So how was I able to actually get high quality sound out of the factory head unit and actually use an optical input into my DSP? That, my friends, is coming up. So this is a DSP, or a digital signal processor. Now, when we're integrating with a factory system, a DSP is a great choice. That's because with a DSP, we can connect to the factory audio system with these speaker level inputs. We can connect multiple different channels from the stock audio system into this device. We can control the signal inside. We can do time alignment, equalization, control crossovers, and then send that signal out to our new aftermarket amplifiers. We definitely need a DSP regardless to completely control our sound and have tuning flexibility. But there are a couple of curveballs that factory systems can now throw us that are hard to control with a DSP. One of those challenges is what you see right here. We're actually looking at the headliner of this vehicle, and you can see that we have these different microphones up on top of the headliner. There's two there, and then there's also two over here. So those are called ANC mics, or active noise cancellation microphones. What the manufacturer does with those is they actually monitor the noise within the cabin of the vehicle, and then they play a frequency that is out of phase of that noise to try to calm down and quiet the noise within the vehicle. This is a very fine-tuned system, so once you start adding aftermarket amplifiers or aftermarket subwoofers and switching things up, you can end up having issues when you're playing those subwoofers, playing those speakers, where the system doesn't really know what's going on and it tries to cancel out, and you end up with these weird noises in your aftermarket system. Another issue that can be challenging to overcome is warning chimes. See these guys right here? These are backup sensors. So when this vehicle is backing up, if anything is in the way, it's going to start alarming. There's going to be a chime that goes off, and usually that comes through the back speakers. Now, what if you didn't bring in signal from those back speakers because let's say it had a very bandwidth limited response that you didn't want to use? You no longer are going to retain that chime. Additionally, even if you did retain that chime in the DSP, you're now going to be amplifying it on your downstream amplifiers, so it's going to be much, much louder. Much like those warning chimes being in the back, you'll also have cases where things like the voice for phone calls or for navigation only comes in on maybe the center channel, the front center channel. Maybe you're not planning on retaining that in the DSP. All of these different signals coming in that aren't just musical signal, but warning chimes and voice and things like that, it really makes the system very complex to try to integrate with just a DSP. Now, there is a nice clean signal that we can use between the factory head unit and the factory amplifier. But the problem with that signal is it's a constant signal. In other words, if you were to turn up the volume and you were using that signal, you wouldn't actually be adjusting the volume. It's just a constant signal. And the reason it's doing that is because the factory head unit actually communicates with a data signal to the factory amplifier. So ideally, what we need is a device that can interpret that data signal between the factory head unit and the factory amplifier, and then allow us the flexibility for what we want to do with that signal. Allow us to retain chimes and send them to certain channels. Allow us to retain the voice and the navigation and send those to certain channels. All of that is exactly what the CarAudio Amp Pro is for. All those different challenges can be difficult to overcome solely with a DSP, but when we pair a DSP with this device, we end up with a super powerful system. So there are different models of the Amp Pro, and to see if your vehicle has compatibility, you can check on their website. In the package, we find a couple of different things. We of course find the device itself. We then find a wire harness that is vehicle specific. We find some instructions, and then we find an adjustment knob. Now, as an upgrade for optical audio output, you can also get this little add-on board here. Adding this on is easy. We'll start with opening up the case, and this is going to give us a full digital output out of the Amp Pro into the audio control DSP. The case on the Amp Pro has this little window knockout that I need to get rid of in order to have access to that optical output. From here, I push that small board into the main board and then reassemble the case. Now, this is probably honestly one of the easiest devices that I've ever installed. I first connected the Amp Pro to my computer using a USB cable. This allowed me to program several different options, such as the minimum volume level, chime volume level, enable and disable the different chimes in the vehicle, enable and disable the factory EQ, set the bass, mid, treble, and center frequencies along with a Q factor for the factory EQ as well. Everything is plug and play with this new wiring harness that just allows the Amp Pro to go in between the factory head unit and the factory amplifier. In fact, the only real challenge with this install is you have to run the RCA signal wires or the optical signal wire along with your remote turn-on wire back to the amplifiers wherever they're mounted in the vehicle. Real quick, before we move on and see the Amp Pro fully installed, I do want to thank monthly channel sponsor Audio Control and show you guys the DM810. If you're not familiar with the DM810, this digital signal processor has 8 channels of input and 10 channels of output. This device connects between your factory system, a factory system adapter, or you can even use an aftermarket head unit with RCA inputs into this. You then have your 10 different channels of RCA output that goes to your amplifiers. To unleash the full tuning flexibility of this device, we connect to it with a USB port on a computer, or we can use this device here to connect wirelessly with an iPad or other mobile device. To learn more about the DM810, check out the link down in the video description, and a big thanks to Audio Control making good sound great. It's a little difficult to see, but I've got everything fully installed here. Got that Pack Audio Amp Pro positioned within the dash. Also, like I mentioned, on my DSP, I'm using the optical input in order to provide signal to the DSP. The nice thing about this is it simplifies the connection. I only have one connection going up to the front of the vehicle, and it's also a digital connection for high fidelity audio. And here we are back in the rear of the vehicle. This is a work in progress, but I've got my DSP mounted on that DSP rack along with the amplifier rack. You guys can check that out in a previous video up here. And if we look right here, we can see that optical signal wire going into our DSP. So we've got everything up and playing right now, and if you hear that static noise in the background, that's because I'm actually currently playing pink noise on the system, and I just wanted to show you guys this is the input right now using that optical input on channels 7 and 8, and I just wanted to show you, look how nice and flat that is without any adjustments whatsoever, super nice and flat into the DSP. So now, once I start tuning my DSP and listening to the audio side of things, I can tune the audio signal to be nice and flat as well. If you want to catch up with this build that I'm currently doing, check out the build playlist here on screen along with my other videos. A big thanks to Audio Control for being a monthly channel sponsor, along with Bernard, John, Brian, Ali, Jeremy, Doug, Steve, Emmanuel, Jerry, and the rest of the Patreon membership team. A big thanks to all those guys for making these videos possible. As always guys, don't forget to design, build, and install.